This episode of the podcast is brought to you by patreon.com/lightscameranonsense. Visit patreon.com/lightscameranonsense to help support your favorite new movie podcast. Now, let's roll that reel.
Dressing up for Halloween or anything? Zach, do you have any Halloween plans? Like for the night of Halloween?
No.
Fair enough. We're almost 30, so what's the point? I don't blame you.
Do you have a plan?
No, I don't. Like, I stopped by a Spirit Halloween the other day, and I just felt kind of sad. And it was super hot in there, too. Like, for some reason, the AC didn't work, so I was like, I gotta get
It's the heat ghost.
Ooh,
Wrecks your
I'm
AC.
a warm ghost. I make it mildly warm for you. Super uncomfortable. I don't have really a transition to go from there to the opening, so we'll just go ahead.
I mean, that's as good as any, right?
It really is, and honestly, I've had enough with this weekend so far.
Hashtag not sponsored.
But yeah, I'm drinking a lot of hard seltzer this weekend. That's the plan.
Just to get away from the world.
I already got tipsy and played a whole bunch of Genshin Impact the other night with some friends of ours. And it was a good night. I got the character I wanted from Wish. Good. So, anyway, video games. This isn't a video game podcast as much as you want it to be.
Yeah.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Lights, Camera, Nonsense, where we give you all the latest movie magic you may have missed. I'm Nick Simmons,
and I'm Zach. Haunted by something Smith.
There's always one week where you don't have something planned, but I figured you were still going to go with the
I could do that too. Zach, please vote Smith.
There you go. See, it's still perfect. It still works. And on the week of October 23rd, not the week of, Sam, I need to fix this. I need to fix this script. On the day of October 23rd, it's not even the 23rd, it's the 24th, isn't it? Oh, God. Fuck today. Fuck this weekend. On October 24th, 2020, let's roll into the previews. Zach, what have you been watching?
So I'm not sure what you watched. Obviously, we'll get to that. But I have a feeling that one of the things we watched was the same thing, possibly finished.
Maybe?
I watched The Haunting of Bly Manor.
Yes, I did as well. I actually finished it just a couple days ago.
Yeah, we did too. Yeah. So, what are your thoughts coming off of that?
It's weird because, so right off the bat on Netflix, if you try to look up The Haunting of Bly Manor, they also show like the Haunting Collection because it's created by Mike Flanagan, who also created The Haunting of Hill House, which came out, I believe, last year.
2018.
Or was it 2018? 2018. And he's made a lot of Stephen King adaptations recently. Fantastic director, except for Oculus. Sorry, I won't defend Oculus. And what threw me off from that is showing the Haunting Collection is like tying it to show that they're both very similar.
Yeah.
When in fact they are not.
Yeah.
Haunting of Hill House is very much what a lot of people expect from a horror TV show or horror movie, in that there are a lot of jump scares and there's a lot of stereotypes being portrayed, while still portraying a scary story told through multiple perspectives. I thought it was a fantastic season, and I was really looking forward to what he was going to do next. Haunting of Bly Manor comes out, and I start seeing the early reviews from screeners that critics received, and they were not, I wouldn't say unsatisfied, but they were kind of taken aback. Exactly. So they were kind of expecting more Hill House, when in fact it's more of a kind of drama.
Yeah, it's like kind of your traditional gothic horror in the sense that it's intertwined with a very heavy romance, gothic romance sort of thing.
Very Mary Shelley as opposed to Wes Craven.
That being said, there's still like there's still things in Bly that resemble like the structure of Hill House. Like Hill House had all the background ghosts that you could spot in all the scenes, and that returns here, where it's kind of like a Where's Waldo sort of thing. Like, oh, there it is. But yeah, ultimately, this is really only similar in a structural sort of way, whereas narratively, it goes kind of a more drama aspect sort of avenue than Hill House did, where Hill House still had drama, obviously, but it was largely more of a scary / horror sort of thing. And in Bly's respect, it does have that horror aspect as well, but it's more centered on your characters and like how they interact with each other.
I would say a lot of the scares that are in Bly Manor are better executed, but that's simply because there is such a large span of time in between each scare, as opposed to Hill House, where it was at least 1 or 2 per episode.
Well, and I think that's saying something, because Hill House, even though you're right, they're pretty evenly spaced in terms of those jump scares or like tense moments. That's still a slow burn for a horror show or just horror or whatever. Where then you look at Bly and it's like 5 times the slow burn that Hill House is. It takes a while for you to like really get a solid grasp on, or maybe not a grasp, but like for the show to actually say, hey, this is what's happening, and all that. There's a lot of like hints here and there, and you can kind of piece it together on your own as a viewer, but for the show itself to be like, okay, this is what we're dealing with here, it basically takes like the entire show until like the last 2 or 3 episodes. To really show up and be like, this is what's up.
So were you able to, before we get too far away from it, were you able to guess any of the surprises or twists?
I was, yeah. 2 in particular, and I don't know how much you want to turn this into a spoiler cast, with it being fairly recent.
I would say let's not get too spoilery, but I think we can inference if you're careful enough. I probably will be less careful, but
so I pieced together what was going on with one of the kids pretty early, and then as well as one of the more prominent attendees of the house. You have your cast of regulars that are always at Bly as kind of caretakers or caregivers for the kids. You have the cook, the housekeeper, the gardener, and then the caretaker or child rearer, I guess. Au pair, yeah.
Child rearer.
I mean, it works. It's the same thing.
Yeah, it's the same thing. Yeah.
I don't think it really held its secrets very close to its chest. I think from even other than things that I slightly mentioned there are things that they're like, oh, what's going on here? And you can pretty quickly kind of tell, what. And that's not a negative. It's just the way that it's shot. No. It has faith in its viewer, I think, because it never outwardly says like, this is exactly what they, there's not like a whole, they do have the narration thing, but it's very sparse.
The frame story.
Because it is all a narrative within a narrative, a frame story. Mm-hmm. So they do have a little bit of it, but it's all really like kind of flowery language and poetic most of the time. So it's very rarely telling you like, this is what's happening in terms of verbiage it's using. It's more done through like shot composition and just action pieces and stuff like that. So I think in that respect, it holds its viewer up to a high standard that they're like, yeah, you can figure out what's going on here. So I don't think it's I think it's by design that those things are pretty easy to figure out most of the time.
Would you say, or would you recommend this show to an average, okay, you bump into somebody and you start talking and you talk about horror movies and they're like, yeah, I like the occasional horror movie. Would you recommend this show to them?
Well, horror as a genre is so vast, and that classifier or classification is so vague in and of itself because there's so many different like niches of horror that when someone's like, oh, I like horror, like, well, what what kind of horror do you like? Because, you know, if you like gore, you know, Bly isn't really that sort of thing. And or even if you're like a big jump scare person, there's like some scary things in Bly, but it's more of like the horror of like how people can treat each other. And this is what I was going to get to eventually, is that while I do like Bly, it's I think well paced in terms of what it's trying to do. It can get a little bogged down in terms of like when you're waiting for a scare, if you're like really watching it to be afraid, then it can like you might be a little left out in the cold in that respect. But I think for being a drama and a character driven piece, I think it does what it does very well. That being said, a lot of that character stuff kind of boils down to this character is a shitty person, and this is why we're going to excuse the way that they're acting.
I think I know which character you're talking about.
Well, there's several that are like that. I think ultimately there's
there's multiple antagonists.
Yeah. It's like 3 or 4 people that I think ultimately are without fault, for the most part. But yeah, all of their, maybe not without fault, but like
because I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt. But one of the characters in particular that is a primary antagonist, pretty close to, I don't want to say like the halfway point, but you start to see like, oh, is he the guy who's responsible, and how did he?
No, I'm not talking about him. He's a fucking dirtbag, and they do that thing where they're like, oh, see, this is why he's the way he is, and I'm like, I don't fucking care. He's an asshole.
Yeah, that doesn't justify everything that he's done up to this point. So,
and the character that he's really attached to as well, I think hers is a little bit more egregious because she's not presented in a way where they're saying that what she's doing is shitty, but it is what she's doing is actually shitty. She's just been kind of like taken in by this other person.
Yeah.
But I never really like when a show or a narrative tries to excuse the actions of a character based off of prior things. Like you can explain why that's happening, but if you're like, it's like an anime trope sort of thing, you know, like where you have a villain for a whole fucking season, and then at the end of the season they're like, I'm a good guy now, or like, but you fucking killed people, man. Like,
yeah,
that's
you have to take into account everything that character did up until that point, and then try to justify all of those. You can't just say, oh, it's justified. Like, you have to give a reason for it.
So there is a lot of that. There's like probably half the cast have that going on. But then I'd say like the main like house people, those 4 are generally pretty okay. They never really like run into something where you're like, oh man, what you did was fucked up, but you know, now I gotta somehow twist, like you're trying to twist my mind into like forgiving them for being a shitty person, but they never really do that. But with everyone else outside of that, they do that pretty regularly. So that was probably the only thing that bugged me a little bit, but ultimately, I did enjoy the show.
Good. So. I would say I enjoyed it overall, but there were some episodes where I had to like kind of slog through, just because they were the slower of those episodes, and they were built up to later episodes. There's even 2 episodes that are part 1, part 2, and they're titled that. and they're not back to back. They're like literally resolved several episodes later. So
it does have a problem with something else that I watched, a similar problem with something else that I watched, in that it will have its main story going and then take multiple branches off that story and like devote that time to it. So in that sense, the like momentum of it is kind of like almost kind of like a start stopping sort of thing. Like if you're on a roller coaster and it just kept like going instead of just going straight.
It's that juddering.
Like it's for good reason, and the context that those episodes or scenes provide are good because they kind of explain more of the mystery that's going on. And I don't know how you get around that, save for like completely redoing how you organize the narrative. Like there's so many different pieces, and they go to try to explain every single piece that's part of that. And again, they don't like do that verbally; they do it through scenes and shot composition and all that. So it's not like it's babying you, but it does take a lot of time to explain each of these things.
Almost every character has a backstory that this season tries to explain, and for better or worse, because sometimes that may, seem like you're padding the runtime of this season, but at the same time, it builds to those climaxes and those climactic scenes that bookend every episode.
Yeah, and I don't know if maybe it's just because, like, I think total character-wise, this has, like, maybe 2 or 3 extra characters in it that Hill House did. So, because Hill House did something very similar where it had all its, like, devoted episodes to certain characters, and in between you would have your main narrative of, like, what's going on with the house and, like, or what happened in the past. We'll get to that later. So it did kind of the same thing in terms of, like, jumping around like that or branching off, but there are so fewer moving pieces. I feel like it was basically the kids and the dad and the mom, but that's like later. But with Bly, you have all the employees at the house, the 2 kids, the uncle, the dad and the mom, the previous au pair, the previous chauffeur, and then whatever ghosts are walking around in the manor as well, so like there's just a lot to get to in 9 episodes or 8 episodes, whatever it was, in terms of 9. Like fleshing everyone out. So I definitely get the critique of maybe it's not the smoothest journey for sure, and I think if given the choice, I'd probably still watch Hill House again over going back to Bly. But I did enjoy Bly, so I wouldn't say I would never rewatch it, but like it wouldn't be my first choice between the 2.
Right, it's kind of like. This is going to be a bad comparison. Don't hate me, previous English teachers, but it's like reading Mary Shelley's Frankenstein or Anne Rice's Interview with a Vampire, and then reading a Stephen King book.
Yeah,
of like his more pop culture type ones, where it's like Cujo, where it's very very obvious what the monster is, who the killer is, and it's kind of like just trying to deal with it. Even The Shining, compared to an older piece of literature. The pace of the action and the events in that book that take place are significantly quicker.
Right.
And it's just it's a style of writing, and I feel like it plays out well with Bly House, but it almost feels like it was made in a different time than, I mean, it technically was, but filmed in a different time period than Hill House.
Right, yeah.
So it's interesting. I would recommend it to people. It may not be everybody's cup of tea, but it's that kind of slow burn horror that isn't very, I wouldn't say popular, but it's not very prevalent in Hollywood.
Yeah, they're harder to come by.
It's just kind of nice to see.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think there's something to be said about having something different. I think it would have been a little boring to have it be exactly the same as Hill House. I like that we still have the Where's Waldo ghosts in there, but I don't know if it's been on record because I think it's since it was one of the last episodes, but I think I said before that I generally prefer new over rehash, even if new tends to be a little worse off, just because it's something different, you know?
Yeah.
So, I'd say good call on Bly for sure. And then the other thing I watched last Sunday was the season 1 finale of Lovecraft Country. So naturally, I binged the entire season within 1 week.
Oh, man.
And that is a great, crazy fucking show. I enjoyed practically every minute of it.
Okay.
I am curious, though, when you were talking about it before, what your cutoff was now that I've seen it.
My cutoff was episode 3, I believe. Yeah. And that was when I realized that there is a very succinct cut in between each of these short stories based off of the book that this series is based on, where we have the same characters, but they're now dealing with a different type of horror, a different type of I'll just stick with horror. And this time they go from having one story, which I thought would last the entire season. Again, I didn't know it until after I researched it after watching the 3rd episode. But the very image of, and I'll just spoil episode 3 because
there's so much shit that you could spoil in this show, and I guarantee you whatever you say about episode 3 is like bottom of the barrel.
And I told myself I was going to give it another shot, and I ended up getting a little behind on work and dealing with other stuff and doing other shows like Barely Playing, which you can check out on this channel or at YouTube. Whatever. Enough self-plugging. But the very first moment, or not the very first moment, but one of the straws that broke my back here, I'm paralyzed from the waist down, is the man with the baby head.
That was episode 2.
Was that
the
2?
haunted house, yeah.
That was episode 2? That wasn't episode 1?
Or
3?
Pretty sure it was 2.
Episode 3 was when they buy the house and they start getting harassed by all of their neighbors and stuff?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that was episode 2. I'm pulling up the app now so I can look.
Okay. But it was very much wow, that CGI is really bad, and I don't understand where this story is going, and I don't understand why they're not referencing stuff that happened in the previous episodes that should have shocked people and had them deal with it and process it over a longer period of time than what they're suggesting, which was only a few months.
Oh, no, you were right. It was episode 3. My bad.
Okay, good. I thought I was going crazy. But yeah, I needed to take a break from it for a second, and I have other shows that I was watching. I think Haunting of Bly Manor actually came out like
it was last Friday, I think.
Right after. Was it last Friday?
It was last Friday, yeah.
Okay, so I guess I was just busy with work, coming up with excuses and watching other stuff, but I could not find myself going back to it, knowing and seeing previews for later episodes that it was going crazy and off the wall and doing different things. I remember at the very beginning of the first episode, there's that World War II scene with Cthulhu, and I was like, okay, well, that will probably be referenced later. I can't wait to look forward to that, and I'm sure there's other crazy shit. What's going to happen? What's going on? And I didn't get that by the end of the 3rd episode, and while I still love the acting all around from all of the actors, there was a weird disconnect from both me and the show when it came to the pacing of the story, and that's probably just me. I know I'm probably in the minority.
Well, I'm hearing good things. I think that's probably a fair assessment at the time because you were watching it week to week. Now, maybe I can alleviate some of your concerns now that I've been able to go back and binge it. The switch to, it's like they do a 2 or 3 week time jump in between episode 2 or 3 after like a pretty cataclysmic ending, maybe not cataclysmic, but big ending in episode 2. And then they kind of mellow back down for a second comparatively to like kind of your standard haunted house. And it seems unconnected at first. But then the next episode, they kind of go like, okay, this is why we were in that house. This is why we were dealing with those certain things. And they kind of bring it back to your general overarching story. And they do this
with what's her name? Sorry.
Yeah. And they do this quite a few times throughout the show where it's like, so I think part of our problem going into it beforehand was we saw a trailer for the show in which a lot that stood out were things from like episode 1 or 2, with the Shoggoths or, like the monsters that are running around. And we're like, oh shit, this looks like very Stranger Things sort of like 80s aesthetic sort of thing going on, but with Lovecraft. That's cool. And then what it actually is it's more like a prolonged D&D / at the Mountains of Madness sort of campaign thing, where you have, theoretically, you have a DM, and they have a large plan for your narrative. And then within those, they have individual scenes or chapters for how these certain things fit into that narrative. And you can take them individually, but there's a larger scale that they also work on. And I think it's hard to tell that going from episode 1 and 2, which are very much connected, like they're just back to back. And then episode 3 is, seems like a total non sequitur. Just out of the blue. And then maybe like some stuff going on. But what's actually happening is it's kind of like setup almost. It's just an episode long, and you don't get how it's set up until after that episode. And this kind of comes into my one complaint with the show, and that it is a pacing issue, but ultimately, more importantly, I think, is a cohesiveness issue. And that while all of its moving parts, I think, are great, sometimes it has a tendency to be like, this was the plan all along sort of thing, but then like certain characters are still acting as though it's like shooting from the hip, Yeah. So they're like trying to be Batman, but also like Bruce Lee at the same time. I don't know if that makes any sense, where you have a air of plan about you, but the actors within it are reacting to certain things.
Okay, so this all sounds very familiar. I feel like I'm shooting from the hip just by saying this, but this narrative dissonance sounds very familiar to me when it comes to HBO and some of their works. We've seen it in the past with, you don't want me to say it, but Game of Thrones, where they just let the creators or the directors behind the camera kind of create their own story, and 9 times out of 10 that only works for the better. But every so often, that 1 out of 10, they don't really have a structure for the future of that show past the final episode of that season. And so we, like, Lovecraft season 2, is it happening?
They've talked a little bit about the possibility of a season 2, and probably another gripe, not a gripe, but like a little like, I don't know about that, is the way it ends is very have your cake and eat it too, which generally I think is a good plan, in that you want to end it in a way where if you weren't to get a season 2, then you are closed off, like you have a narrative that works on its own, but then also leave enough questions to where it leaves a viewer going like, if they do, man, I hope they do a season 2 because I really want this. And what actually ends up happening is you think you've closed it off, but you have way more questions than what your close off. Like the end of season 1, I feel is kind of a letdown in terms of where it ends, just compared to like everything that happens in setup. Like there's so much grand scale stuff that's super fucking cool and rad going into the last scene, and then the last scene is over in like 10 minutes, and it doesn't like have a huge weight, like a huge punch behind it that I think would have like really sold it. And then you're left with all these questions. Well, like the setup to that last scene feels like that setup is more important to a season 2 than the final scene of a season 1, I feel like. And you brought up Game of Thrones, and I think you could conceivably say that it's a similar problem in terms of like not knowing where you're heading and then just kind of building towards that. I think the difference is with Game of Thrones, Weiss and Benioff, you know, it felt like they just had a place that they wanted to go and they didn't care how they got there. And so they just like fucking catapulted to the end. With
quite literally
with Lovecraft, Misha Green, the director and writer on much of it, she is very cognizant of not only of how she's building it, but also the imagery that she's applying. So there's nothing in there that she's done on accident, save for I think there's one technical fuck up on a map where something is supposed to be taking place in Kentucky, but the map they're reading is Kansas. Which
that's probably a prop.
Yeah. She was on Twitter. It was like, because someone had asked like, hey, why does it say that? Is this like some other like puzzle piece? And she's like, oh yeah, that was because I fucked up.
Hey, I'm happy that a director can come out and say, no, that was me messing up. We didn't see it in the edit, and it ended up, you know, being in the final product.
And there's a couple things that she's done that with too. There's a very a heavy scene in, I think 4 or 5. It's A History of Violence, which just makes me think of the movie. But there's a scene in there in which a character is killed. And then it is talked about for maybe like 15 minutes in the next episode and then completely dropped. It never comes up again. And it's like, not good.
You could see why that would throw me off going from 2 to 3.
Yeah.
And then finishing it and going, okay, well, where does the story and how, I mean, because they have characters connected to a character that ends up dying in episode 2 that they continue their story on, and you're like, how are they not as affected as they should? I mean, they are in a way, but
yeah,
I didn't really see that story going that much forward.
Right, and I know which one you're talking about, and the excuse for that is that, you know, they're trying to keep a secret, so that's how you can kind of explain that away. But with this other one, like, this person is killed for character development, and they're a person from a very underrepresented group in just media in general.
Right.
They're killed and then used as like character development for like maybe 20 minutes in the next episode. And then, yeah, they never come up again. That's not a thing that hangs over that person's head that has committed that crime. It's just like not talked about. And Misha Green,
outside of narration, voiceover, you know,
yeah, not even that. Like, it's just dropped. And Misha Green has gone on record and said she considers that a failing of hers. So, and yeah, like you said, I like when directors and writers are able to approach their work and recognize the shortcomings of that. So, in that respect, going back to what I was talking about, comparing it to like Game of Thrones, I think the way it happens in Lovecraft is it's like you have so much that you want to do, and you're focusing on it. Like, I think the characters are forefront, and then the plot is secondary, to the point where like the main big bad of the season is like, so whatever, like anytime they're on screen, I'm just like, I literally don't fucking care. And they do a similar thing that we talked a little bit about with Bly, where it's like, it tries to make you think like, oh, see, this is kind of what's going on with that. You can sympathize.
There's two sides.
But I think the difference here is that they know that they're doing that, and it doesn't work. I think they know it doesn't work, and that's the point. But it's still kind of like, it's not a very interesting character. So, like, the scenes with that person are just kind of whatever. I just want to get back to Journey Smollett, Jonathan Majors, you know, everyone that's part of that main ensemble cast, just fucking knocking it out of the park. And, Yeah, the places it goes are fucking nuts. Like, I would like to see someone try to distill the plot of Lovecraft Country into like a 5-minute synopsis and watch them fail miserably just because of places it goes. It's fucking crazy.
Well, I'll have to give it another shot just based on that recommendation alone. But before we get too far away from it, I also wanted to recommend, or not recommend, but I mean, I will recommend it. Another show where the director and the creators behind it have come out and said that, you know, we had an idea for that show from beginning to end. And honestly, if we don't get another season 2, or if we don't get a season 2, or we don't get a future for the show, I'm okay with where it ended. And that was on HBO. It's Watchmen.
Yeah.
And that's where they had a cohesive story from beginning to end. And they saw that there could both be a future for it, but also if we decided we didn't have anything, we would step away from it. And so there is always an out for the creative team behind a show to step back and see it and go, yeah, I'm okay with this. I'm okay with the end result, and not necessarily have to come up with something just to, I don't know, ride the coattails of your own success. I'm not saying that they're
to keep it going,
vain in any way. Yeah. Right. And because they feel like they have another story to tell, we'll only do it if you're absolutely sure.
Yeah.
And that's the biggest difference. It's kind of a weird spectrum of both Watchmen and Game of Thrones. It's like you see two very extreme examples of what could happen to a show if you don't have a beginning, middle, and end in mind.
Right.
But let me pivot back to what I was saying before. I'll check out Lovecraft Country. I was interested in the first 2 episodes. I was interested in the premise of the show. I thought the acting and the visual effects were fantastic. So I'll give it another shot.
I think once you just like change your framework of how the show is working in terms of not just a straight narrative, but like these little pieces that fit into an overall picture, then I think you'll find that it's much more palatable. It still has some pacing issues. Again, much like Bly, there's a lot of moving parts, so it will take the time for characters to like sit down and discuss what's happening. And because it's Lovecraft, not only because it's Lovecraft, because Lovecraft is dense already, but because they're using Lovecraft, which is notoriously racist and exclusionary, and then turning it on its head. So it's kind of like it's presenting and then what's the word, deconstructing what it has in its hands, and its characters will go on these like kind of explanation tangents that are, you know, they can be a little tough to get through sometimes if you're like kind of zoning in and out, because they're so heavy, so dense. But I think if you like I like that kind of like overwrought technical shit, where it's like blending mystical with practical, and like how does like sanity work in the real world, or like how does Lovecraft magic work in the real world, and you know, where are its origins from, that kind of thing. That's really cool to me. But I can see if you don't want to get bogged down in that kind of technical aspect of it, it might be a little rough sometimes, but I think ultimately it's worth it. And like I said before, Misha Green does nothing on accident for the most part. So like every piece, you could probably make a dissertation paper on like every 2 or 3 episodes together, just because there's so much relating back to Black history and, you know, Lovecraft in general, and how they both work within the framework that they're building on their own. It's pretty wild just with that aspect alone. And then you add in all the fucking crazy stuff that happens in the later half of the season. So yeah, I would say definitely give it another shot with that new outlook.
Will do.
But that is it for me. Nick, what did you watch?
Well, let's just go ahead and hop off of what you were just talking about with how it's basically using a part of our history to tell a deconstructive version of a previous author's work and kind of put a new spin on it, while also trying to, I don't know where I'm going with this, because the movie that I watched is nothing like that, but it's also trying to hop off of the success of Jordan Peele's filmography as of late, which is, the Us and the Get Out. So a movie I watched, which actually just came out a couple of days ago, was Bad Hair.
Okay.
On Hulu.
Yeah, I've seen a little bit about this, but not much.
So this movie is a story straight out of Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark.
Yeah.
While also giving it a unique perspective of how Black women had to deal with the changing hairstyles and times and culture in the late 80s to early 90s, while, weaves were starting to get introduced and straight hair was the new norm for people. But first off, I'm not a hair guy. Like, I had people do this for me. I didn't do this myself. This would have turned out like 7 different colors. I don't know anything about hair. So I was learning that weave is essentially sewing in hair into your head. And there were some very grotesque shots in this movie depicting that. So that was eye-opening for me. Overall, before I get too much into what it's about, there are some... It's odd because I loved 80% of this movie, but some of the moments that should be like straight horror turn out to look very... like sci-fi original channel type of CG aspects. And I can't tell if it's trying to be campy or if it's trying to be, a legitimate horror movie. Because while it has definite influences on, or it's influenced by Jordan Peele's more recent films, it's also an homage to like late 80s, early 90s slasher films and monster films, in that it's got like the stylized impact text that shows up at the beginning of the movie to show the title. It's filmed in a way, because it's set in 1989, to give off this, it's got like zoom cuts to show in like a character's reaction when it's like very obvious that that technique is not used anymore. But it tells the story of a young executive assistant at like a TV show that's basically like an MTV for the Black community, and how it's changing. Like one person quits because they don't like the way that it's changing. And so, what is his name from Dawson's Creek? Main guy, Dawson.
Shit.
Why are we're blanking on his name?
Hey, who's the main guy from Dawson's Creek?
Chad Michael Murray. No,
that's a different show.
Different guy.
With the face. He's the crying face guy.
Yeah.
He was in How I Met Your Mother, too.
Yeah.
Shit.
He's got like 3 names.
James Vanderbeek.
James Vanderbeek. Thank you, Casey.
Thank you, Casey, for the assist.
I'm glad she didn't know it off the top of her head, because then you would have to worry.
Yeah.
But
well, he's not worried, but feel inadequate.
Oh, James Vanderbeek, he's my favorite.
The 2 people with a fucking movie and television podcast can't remember James Vanderbeek.
Hey, that's not our fault, all right? To be fair, we grew up with Dawson's Creek, but that was not our demographic growing up, right?
Well,
I almost said Jonathan Taylor Thomas.
We were more Degrassi, so I guess I'll give you that one.
Yeah, so James Vanderbeek is the studio executive, and he's saying, all right, well, this lady is getting fired because we're changing the way things look. Here's the new executive. There are a lot of cameos in this movie of actors whose names I can't remember, but as soon as you see them, you're like, oh, hey, it's that person.
Yeah.
I apologize. That's a fault on my part and a gap in my film knowledge. However, I was like, oh, it's that person. I've seen them, at Academy Award shows and stuff. Anyway, James Vanderbeek is like, all right, here's this new person, and she is like, all right, I'm going to change everything about the entire studio, and we're going to rename it and change the programming. And that's the whole like framework of the story, as the young executive assistant is like trying to do her best to appeal to this new higher up. And so she has to change her hair, which when she was a young child tried to straighten it, I believe. And then she got like burned in the back of her head. Yeah. And lost and like got scarred. So she basically gets a weave, which apparently in the late 80s, and I don't know if it's still like a thing now, where it's like $500 to get a weave.
From what I understand, yeah, that they're
it's like really expensive to sew dead hair into your head. Again, totally unknowledgeable. I don't know. I'm like, hey, cut off this part, and the back part, and like, I'll shampoo this part.
Make it purple.
Make it purple, or pink or whatever. I don't care. But it turns out that the hair that she got is from, I'll just go ahead and spoil it because it's not a huge thing. Is from witches, and it's possessed, and it starts attacking certain people that are aggressive, and it's just weird. It's very much like a 70s like Hammer flick, or I don't know. I was kind of waiting for the grain to show up on my TV screen while I was watching the movie. Like that's how like it felt campy, but it also felt like they were taking it seriously. So it was a weird kind of
in between sort of thing.
In between, like trying to find the tone of whether it was a serious horror film, because it's a slow burn at the beginning. You don't see much horror aspects until like a good chunk into the movie, but it's weird. It's if you're kind of looking for more of a something Halloween-esque to watch, as opposed to watching Haunting of Bly Manor, which is much slower. I would recommend this if you're a fan of Get Out or Us or even Lovecraft Country. I think there's a general movement for Black culture to be introduced to horror film. Not that they weren't in the past, but that there's this renaissance
more widely available.
Right, going on, and I think it's amazing because I never would have heard about this film unless it was advertised, obviously. Right. So, I would recommend it.
Nice.
It's cheesy, and there's some comedic moments, like someone gets pulled up a flight of stairs by their face from some CGI hair.
Yeah,
the CGI hair is very silly, but it actually reminds me of a short story from Junji Ito. Oh. If you watch or if you read his stuff, there's a one in Uzumaki that's very similar to this. But yeah, that's on Hulu. I can't really say much more to that. It's just kind of a campy. Would it be a monster movie? Because she's like she doesn't even anyway. It's weird. It's so weird. Like I came out of the movie like I don't know if I like this or hate this.
Yeah,
and it was daytime when I watched it too, so maybe I would have enjoyed it more.
Yeah, it could be. Yeah.
That's the trouble with horror movies. You got to kind of watch them at night. But every time it's nighttime, I'm like, all right, if the sun's down, I should be in bed because I have to wake up super early in the morning.
Yeah, I forgot to mention, I just off the cuff watched. I never realized that I did this, but like generally every year around Halloween time, I'll just watch Clue. And so I came to that realization this year, and while I was watching Clue again. Yep, still fun.
We didn't watch it together. I would have watched.
I mean, I'll watch it again. That's a great movie.
That's a good movie
with some things that I don't remember being in it that are a little eyebrow raising.
Are they like out of touch lines?
Yeah. Do you remember the reason why they're being blackmailed?
No, I don't. It's actually been a minute since I've seen the movie. I just remember enjoying it.
It's basically because they're all associated with the government in one way or the other, and they've done some fucked up shit, and one of the person's secrets is that they're gay. And they would lose their job if that came out, which is, like, that is true. That was happening. But, when that comes up, I'm like, oh.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Yeah, for a comedy film, you don't really
I don't remember this at all.
Yeah. Pivoting into comedy. Thank you, Zach, for the transitions this episode.
You're very welcome.
I watched Borat's subsequent movie film, or Borat 2.
Okay. You did it.
I did it.
How was it?
For the podcast. So, it's not bad. I
have seen so many wild different takes about this fucking movie. And
it's because of the year that we live in. It is going to be very hard to recommend this movie to a large crowd of people, let alone a single person, just based on views in the political landscape alone. Like, you can be leaning one direction or the other, and this movie will hit you different because of just the story that they're trying to tell. Not realizing that it's satire, not realizing that every single line of dialogue in this movie is a joke. Apparently forgetting that Borat 1 existed and that they can watch that and see all of the examples in that film of why it's a satire. But all that being said, it's a continuation of the fictional character created by Sacha Baron Cohen of Borat, can't remember his last name, from Kazakhstan, coming over to America to, film a documentary for one reason in the first film and for a different reason in the second film. It's not really a spoiler what I say, but you're
not
just
unless
kind of
you
along
haven't
for the
seen
ride.
the first one.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the story for the second one that just came out, but
yeah, I know, but that's in response to the way the first one is.
Oh, yeah.
So, like, I guess if you haven't seen the first one, then the setup would be a spoiler, but...
Oh, yeah, but even so, like, they write off a character that was in the first film.
His manager?
His manager is not in the sequel, and it's like a 2-second joke that they reference at the very beginning of the movie why he's not there. And I could not. I laughed so hard that I cried. And then I immediately was like, why did that affect me so much? And it's because I knew what I was in for.
Yeah.
Because I knew exactly what kind of movie it was going to be, and I wasn't disappointed. So, I could get into the details about what the film is, but it's basically a satire on what America is like right now in late 2019 to present day, and how different Americans are and how stupid we can be when when they can't realize that somebody is making fun of them right to their face.
Well, it's the same concept of the first one, that was a takedown of America in the middle of the W
Bush
years.
administration.
Then it's the same thing with the Trump years.
Yes. I would say to even greater effect, just because of how volatile everybody's opinion are about, and less than 2 weeks away from the election. It's I always try to stray away from politics just in general on this podcast because we want to talk about movies and TV, but they show up in movies and TV, and so it's kind of hard to dodge around it. They don't lean into politics. They just show how Americans react to this Borat character.
Right.
Literally saying lines of dialogue that people have said on Twitter and on Instagram and other social media, and it should be horrifying to see. It should be a horror film. But the fact that a lot of people will see it, I mean, you're either going to see it as a comedy film or you're going to see it as a straight up hit piece.
Well, and it's like, depending on who you are, it's probably like a form of catharsis, right? Like, oh, look at how fucking stupid these people are. It's just like confirmation of something you already knew, basically. Yeah. So in that regard, I guess that's how you would receive that.
Yeah, basically that's what it is. It's first and foremost a satire, and there's comedy bits and there's like heartwarming moments in this film. But at the base of it, it's good for a quick laugh right before you go and vote. Yeah. So if you haven't already, and for some reason you watch this film before voting because you don't have anybody in mind, I don't see this film swaying anyone.
Yeah.
Either way. Because, again, it's not political, but it's also a satire of how Americans are. And I got depressed a little towards the middle when I see a scene that was in the news a couple of months ago, and that shows up. I'm like, okay, I was waiting for this scene to show up, and here it is.
Well, that scene, and then other scenes that have since within the past week. And
Yeah. Yeah, if you're a fan of comedy, go and watch it. It's on Amazon Video. Sorry, I kind of disappointed you this episode, Zach. You were all in for Lovecraft Country and Haunting of Bly Manor. You had some like good recommendations, and I'm like, I could have watched The Queen's Gambit.
That's all right.
Which dropped, but it's a limited series, and they're all like an hour and a half each, and it's like 5 episodes. And then there was Rebecca, and I'm like, those aren't really Halloween themed. What is political satire, and whatever bad hair is. Well, I can't tell if it's a monster movie or what.
You're already scared with the general state of affairs in America anyway, so.
It's true. It's true.
You don't need extra scares.
It's a real shit show out there, for sure. Zach, I don't have anything else. Let's dive into the news.
Okay. All right. So let me, you kind of cold cocked me there. I didn't have my thing up.
Okay, please don't take that out of context.
All right, so first up, David Fincher in an interview has said that a third season of Mindhunter is very unlikely, mostly due to the fact that after the second season, he was exhausted, he and his team were. He talked a little bit about how just for the amount of viewers that they were pulling in for the second season and the amount of work that they were doing, it was probably unlikely, not only from Netflix's standpoint, but from his own, that he would come back for a third season of Mindhunter. Which I think that everyone who was on cast for Mindhunter, they were released from their Netflix contracts like a couple months ago. So that follows. Yeah, I mean, I really liked the first season of Mindhunter, and I still mean to go back and watch the second season, but I think the problem was that it took three or 4 years for it to come out. So
that's the unfortunate downside to filming something as extensive as a period piece TV series.
Yeah,
you know, I guarantee you Lovecraft Country wasn't filmed over the span of a few weeks. That took several months. You have sets, you have prop design, you have, research into how everything looks and how everything sounded. And I mean, David Fincher alone, if you look at any of his films, like there is a lot of work and effort put into the production from beginning to end. So
yeah, he sounded like reading this interview, it sounded like he was fucking miserable by the end of the second season. So I don't blame him for not wanting to go. And well, quite frankly, the subject matter is bleak in it itself. And that being said, Fincher has never shied away from bleak subject matters. But like, if you're delving into something like that for a long period of time and you're not seeing a huge return on it he was talking about how he was basically the person in charge of all scripting in season 1. So he was tired from that. And then going into season 2, he got the script for the first couple episodes or something and he hated it. So they scrapped it and he had to bring in someone else to help him write it. Because whoever they had on it at the time just kind of, he felt like shit the bed.
It's too happy. Fuck.
It basically sounds like he was showrunner as director for the majority of the time.
Too many hats.
And I could definitely see how that would wear you down after a while.
Well, that's upsetting. Hopefully,
and you brought up Lovecraft Country. I think something also to keep in mind is HBO is still very much, with HBO Max, treating almost all of its television as prestige television.
Right.
Like they're still putting like a lot of advertising behind it. Netflix has the shotgun method where it will just put a shit ton of stuff out and not advertise like 60% of it.
Yeah.
So, like, you combine that with the fact that Mindhunter Season 2 didn't come out for, like, 3 years after the first one, just with all the cast's scheduling conflicts and all that stuff, script rewrites.
Moving on to other projects,
it's not really a surprise that it turned out this way.
Well, I'm kind of glad. I mean, I finished Season 1. I never got into Season 2 much like you, and personally, just moving forward, I think would be the best possibility for David Fincher and for the cast in general. I mean, can't remember the character's name, but the guy with the thick rimmed glasses that they interviewed.
Yeah.
He is in the Umbrella Academy, season 1 and 2.
Oh.
He's one of the assassins. Yeah. He's fantastic. And I think just like even the side characters, I think they can move on to do better projects like the people that they interview as serial killers. And I can't remember the main actor's name, who's like the lead.
For Mindhunter?
Yes.
Jonathan Groff?
Yes. Oh, yeah. Hamlet. Or not Hamlet. Fuck.
Hamlet.
Oh, God. Hamilton. He's
And
in Broadway.
Frozen.
Some musical version of some stage thing that Shakespeare wrote. Just kidding.
Yes, the Shakespeare created Hamilton.
Go ahead and tell your wife that I said Hamlet instead of Hamilton.
Yeah.
Hopefully they move on to better projects. That's what I'm basically saying.
Yeah. Moving on, Tim Burton is in talks to produce/direct a live-action Addams Family television series. So nothing solid yet, but it sounds like he's pretty invested in this. It's a pretty good fit.
I mean,
of all
people. I was going to say, wait, to produce or to...
Produce/direct.
Okay. Like maybe the pilot or whatever.
This says via Deadline that he's in talks to executive produce and possibly direct all episodes.
Oh, wow. I'm looking at the animated movie that came out last year.
There's going to be a second
44% on Rotten Tomatoes.
Yeah, I forgot that thing even came out, and then I saw a thing the other day that was like Addams Family 2. I'm like, oh, all right, cool.
Wait, they're making a sequel to it?
Uh-huh, yeah.
I guess it made its money back. It was a budget of like $24 million. Let's see. Oh, and grossed $203 million on a 24. Yeah, so yeah, that makes sense. Yep. Yep.
Doesn't matter if it's shit if it made money.
Oh, it's an animated kids film, of course. Little goth kids with their goth mascara makeup. They're going to be like, hell yeah, The Thing.
Is that the appeal of the Addams Family? Is goth kids?
Little goth kids, yeah. Sure. Tim Burton is my hero.
Sony has officially pushed Ghostbusters Afterlife to June 11th of 2021.
Oh, I heard Stoney, not Sony. I was like, who's Stoney?
You know, Stoney.
Who's moving all these dates?
Stoney has performed a coup in Sony. He's now in charge of everything.
Lower the T. There we go. Now it's Stoney instead of Sony.
There you go.
They're moving the date of Ghostbusters Afterlife.
Yes, so that'll be mid next year now, June 11th. And then in the same press release, which seemed like a kind of a weird moment, because I didn't even know this was a thing, but apparently Don't Breathe 2 is coming out. Mm-hmm. I don't remember this being announced at all.
Yeah, I think it was announced just a few weeks after the first one came out because of how successful it was.
Really? Yeah. I mean, I didn't see the first one until like a year after it came out.
That's on
that was a fucked up movie. It was good.
It's a good horror movie, yeah.
Yeah, that has been confirmed for August 13th of 2021. So
we'll see.
With
every 2021 date.
We'll see.
You know. Yeah.
All the initial release dates are always like...
Yeah, the first pushback, you're like, second pushback... Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes more sense. 2021 is like 2020.5.
Yeah. We got some Snyder Cut news because it's the news that just keeps on giving. This is like the version of Joker from last year.
Yeah.
Snyder Cut just keeps coming up. So both Jared Leto and Joe Manganiello. I hope I said that right. Manganiello.
I say Manganiello, but I could be wrong. There's an I in there somewhere.
Yeah. Manganiello. Manganiello.
Damn Italian names with your I's and your E's and your 4 L's.
They have both come on board for reshoots for the Justice League Snyder Cut. Obviously with Jared Leto being the big one because he wasn't actually in the original movie.
Watch. His scenes are only going to be like 5 minutes.
I'm so ready for him to shoot like 3 hours for this fucking thing and then get cut down to like 20 minutes and
exactly.
throw another
not even that. Like his character is going to be so small to everything else. And Deathstroke is like, Deathstroke makes more sense. Like, shoot more stuff with Deathstroke because you actually introduced him in the original cut. Mm-hmm. Okay, we'll put that one end credits scene in the middle of the movie and then have him show up to fight Batman at one point to get information about Darkseid. You know, that's cool. That makes sense. Why is Joker here? Because Harley Quinn isn't in here, so...
Yeah, I guess that's true. Yeah,
she's not.
I was thinking Suicide Squad. This fucking DC Universe shit is so fucked.
The Suicide Squad, not Suicide Squad.
Excuse me. Does this feel like, and I know like it's a little different because this is being separated into like 4 episodes, like 2-hour-long episodes. Mm-hmm. Does this feel like it's becoming a little bit of Spider-Man 3?
Oh, with too many villains?
Yeah, where it's just like throw fucking everything at it.
If Zack Snyder was smart, which... then I'm not gonna. if he knew what he was doing, which apparently this is the whole plan. This is apparently what he originally intended. He wanted a coronavirus to break out. He wanted COVID-19 to delay everything and have Justice League come back into HBO Max.
This is a Lights Camera Nonsense exclusive. Zack Snyder, officially the reason why we have the coronavirus. So
he knew about it all the way back in 2017, folks. And he planned for it.
Mm-hmm.
None of that's true. But I really think if he was smart, he would really make those roles small like I mentioned before. I think the Jared Leto Joker and I think the Deathstroke is going to be like a couple small scenes to ramp up into bigger scenes. But again, with them being like 4 2-hour episodes of like a mini series kind of thing, who knows? Because that's a lot of time to have these characters show up. But who knows?
I mean, you're basically making 4 movies, right?
Yeah.
At that point,
I think no matter what, Jared Leto fans and Joe Manganiello fans are going to be disappointed with the amount of screen time that they're going to have. But guess what? They're not going to be the main villain. They're not the main villain. Darkseid is the main villain. Or Steppenwolf, whatever's going to... I don't know about this fucking thing, man. I don't want it to happen. I just want to move on, man. We should have had Black Adam at this point.
Yeah. Well.
Or the Flash movie.
To me, it feels like, not only does it feel like Spider-Man 3, but it feels like...
Amazing Spider-Man 2?
Somebody at HBO Max... No, I didn't watch that one, so I can't tell. Which I guess that would be Amazing Spider-Man 2, because I haven't seen Justice League either.
Well, I was going to say, it's they cram 3 villains in it, and then like try to shove as many references to... not official, but like... what is it called? Like... comics that they constantly reference to, very, very iconic comics, and they're gonna. All right, let's use this panel in the movie. Yeah, comics. Basically.
To me, I wonder if it's just like whether it's self-imposed or if somebody asked him to do it. It feels like Zack Snyder's like, I have to fix all of the DC universe prior to Wonder Woman or whatever. You know, the shit show that was beforehand. All in one go. So let me just throw everything in here.
I didn't hear anything that you said in the last 30 seconds.
Well, it's not really.
I turned my chair and unhooked my my mic or my headphones. So,
well, we'll take that as an opportunity to move on.
Okay, that's fair. Justice League.
Fast and the Furious 11 has been confirmed, quote unquote, as the last of the core entries in the Fast and the Furious franchise. Right. With Justin Lin, who directed, I think, the 6th one.
3, 4, 6, 8, and 9.
He's set to helm both 10 and 11. So
he's honestly the guy, the main director of this. He's the Zack Snyder of this cinematic universe.
Wow.
Well, I mean, it's a good comparison. He's essentially the Russo brothers from the MCU. You know, it's these directors that attach themselves and put their talents and fingerprints all over the franchise, and that's where they decide to go. They decide to continue to use this same directive team or creative team, and because they found success with their works, they're like, all right, well, Tokyo Drift did fantastic because Too Fast, Too Furious fucking sucked, and then 4 was, and then, you know, after 5, 6, or I believe he did 5 and 6. Yeah, he did 5 and 6, and then James Wan did 7, and then he did 8 and 9.
So are you saying that Tokyo Drift is the Winter Soldier of the Fast and the Furious franchise?
Yes, in the fact that it shows... Oh, fuck, no. Because 3... It depends on how
Winter
you play
Soldier
it, man.
Winter Soldier was the first one with the Russos on board.
Yeah, but I mean, if you're equating their films to those directors, yeah, if you want to compare...
Well, you're the one who equated them.
I was equating the directors to the cinematic universe and their fingerprints being tied to those franchises.
But if you're calling in the Russo brothers for the good ones, and you're calling in Justin Lin,
that's not what I said. That's not what I said. I said they are the main driving force for that franchise. I didn't say that the good ones, the only good ones, are directed by the Russo brothers.
So Tokyo Drift is actually the Civil War of the Fast and the Furious.
No. No.
The Boys Season 3 is set to start filming in early 2021.
They're just going to keep going and going and going and going.
Well, I mean, if you keep on drawing viewers in, you know.
I mean, they're going to... it was a massive success for Amazon, and they're going to be introducing even more characters in Season 3, including... What's his name from Supernatural?
Jared Padalecki.
Nope. It was the other one. Pretty sure.
Jensen Ackles.
There we go. Jensen Ackles is going to be Soldier Boy. And it's also going to introduce his superhero team, which is kind of like a grown-up Teen Titans group. Or Young Justice kind of group. And they are going to be introduced, and it's going to be interesting. Because I think he's a really... When he actually tries in stuff that he's in, good old Johnson Anclays he could be a good actor. So we'll see.
Nice. Yeah. I still got to get on that.
On the boys?
On the boys.
The buoys?
The buoys.
You are you as soon as you finish episode 1, you're like, why the fuck haven't I watched this sooner?
One day.
Like, you could do that tonight.
You're probably not wrong. I got a couple things that I think I want to watch beforehand. Movies, specifically, that are on my docket that I want to watch before I dive into another TV show, I think.
You might want to... I mean, you could justify it by saying, I don't want to watch something that's not spooky or horror-related because it's still spooky season.
Yeah,
you know, November 1st is, granted, the first day of Christmas, apparently.
That's how it works, yes. Once Halloween's over, it's Christmas time, except for that weekend of Thanksgiving.
Yeah, just
Thanksgiving, and then we're back to Christmas.
Yeah, just one fat day or two to kind of comatose, and then back to it.
On more filming news, The Mandalorian Season 3 is set to start filming before the end of this year. So we got Season 2 coming up on October 30th, and apparently the filming for Season 3 will be starting not soon after, or soon after that.
So what they are, from what I've read, they are going to be using more of a film technique that they started introducing in Season 1, where it's like the new version of green screen, where it's basically like one single circular screen that can project one image.
I don't know if you saw, but Matt Reeves is employing this with the Batman as well for finishing up shooting.
I mean, because he apparently can't
get that fucking production off the ground for more than 5 minutes.
He's trying so hard. I feel so bad for the man because he basically revived the Planet of the Apes franchise for me personally, and I'm really looking forward to the Batman moving totally past what you were just talking about. Man, fucking Mandalorian. I just want to watch it and be done with it so that I can move on and watch others. And not because I'm disappointed or like I don't care about the Mandalorian.
You want to watch and you want to be done with the Batman or Mandalorian?
Mandalorian. Sorry, I moved back to Mandalorian. I just kind of want to watch that so that I can stop seeing the fucking headlines of the Mandalorian. I just want to move past. I want to get to like January 1st, 2021. Since like April of this year.
We saw Baby Yoda shit for half the year after the first season of.
I know, but I can ignore that. I could just be like, oh yeah, that's cute. I remember seeing that in the show. Like being on the other side.
So what you're telling me,
a TV show that you've been anticipating for months and months and months is so gratifying because you can move on to the next thing.
To me, it sounds like you're going to hate watch Mandalorian season 2.
I'm not going to hate watch it. I'm very much looking forward to it, but like I've been anticipating it for an entire year. Yeah. And after the year of 2020, I'm both exhausted and mentally broke.
Well, it's kind of like one of those things we've gotten so few things that we were promised at the beginning of the year, right? Like they've all gotten pushed to next year. So when one of those few things is actually going to show up, I get what you mean. It's therapeutic in a way.
Exactly.
Amazon is apparently in the works of adapting a television series for I Know What You Did Last Summer. It will be very much in the same vein as the original movie, which I think was 97.
Trilogy of movies. I know what you did last summer. I still know what you did last summer. And I believe the last one was called something even stupider.
I believe the first one was based on a book, though. So I think that's what they're getting at, is they're going to be following that. But it'll obviously have a, quote, modern spin on it.
Okay, so the first one is I Know What You Did Last Summer. And then the second one is called I Still Know What You Did Last Summer. And the direct-to-video sequel to that is I'll Always Know What You Did Last Summer.
Oh, that's amazing. I love that.
Based off of I Still Know What You Did Last Summer.
Yeah. I thought you were going to say the third one was I'll Never Forget What You Did Last Summer.
I mean, that could be the name of the new one or the show. But that's so fucking long, man.
I mean, the title's long anyway. It's already a long title.
It is.
They just need like a Final Fantasy fucking subtitle.
Like a colon and then like Loxus, Parabellum.
Eclipse of the Moon, Shadowlight or something like that.
That's it. We're renaming the podcast to that.
I Know What You Did Last Summer, Eclipse of the Moon, Shadowlight.
Nice. It's like the name of every dark video game in the early 2000s.
Yeah. Or JRPG.
Yeah.
Showtime is apparently reviving Dexter as a limited series.
They're finished. They're redoing the ending. Or it's a second ending.
It's double. They have so much double speak in like these PR tours that they're doing right now because they're like, yeah, it gives us a chance to redo the ending. But everything that happened in the ending still happened. So
yeah, it's still like, canon.
All right,
but we're doing it because we can, and we don't really have any ideas for anything new because we're Showtime.
That terrible ending is still going to be there, but hopefully the addendum we put on the end of it will be a little bit better. Everyone will be reprising their roles. There's no release date yet,
except for the dead characters. Yeah,
obviously, yes.
Well, maybe
they might show up again. I don't fucking know.
I never got on the Dexter train. It
was a great show up until it wasn't.
You can say that about most shows that we talk about on this podcast.
And then I felt obligated to finish it because you watch so many seasons of a show, you want to know how it ends, and then that was the ending, and yikes.
Man, it's happened to you more than once then, hasn't it?
It is. This is why I don't watch television very often.
Until it's already over?
I'm actually pretty sure I talked about this before on our end of the year podcast in January, I think. I talked a little bit how I feel like I've kind of strayed away from television on the regular because of Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
Because I invested so much time and energy into that, and then it just was not what I wanted.
It's come full circle now, Zach. I'm so sorry.
Yeah. That being said, Bly and Lovecraft are good refreshers in that respect. And Mandalorian.
With Bly and Lovecraft, you can easily see both of those as single season shows.
Yes.
Right? Yeah, save for what you implied earlier in the podcast.
Well, and the way Lovecraft ended for season, I want a season 2. So,
oh, okay. All right. Well, there you go. You still have to wait a long ass time. You may be disappointed by season 5 of Lovecraft Country.
I may. I very well may. Who's to say? Moving on. Disney has done a huge reorganization, or at least seemingly huge reorganization of its strategy. Get it.
There's a fly.
Get it. Get that fly.
I don't know if I killed it. I don't see the body.
Now it's going to fucking stalk you while you're sleeping.
Ghost fly. Shit. Anyway, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, Disney is reorganizing, so they're putting a bigger focus on streaming. It sounds like the way that they're doing it is that they will just be having their creatives, their creators doing, planning in terms of storyboarding and all that on their own. And then they are going to have a separate unit that is dedicated to taking all of the stuff that is created in-house and distributing it, or figuring out how and where to distribute it, whether or not it should be on Disney Plus, Hulu, ESPN Plus, or in theaters, that kind of thing. So,
or in your mailbox. Do you see this as the harbinger of more Mulans, where it's $30 to rent it?
It's hard to say because we don't have the data really from that. Like, we have kind of rough numbers that were so. But I mean, we're getting Soul on Christmas for free. If you're a Disney Plus subscriber. So it doesn't look like that they're at least immediately sticking to that. But it's to me, what it sounds like is that they are basically, they have a whole unit of economists and market kind of people looking at how things are performing and where they think certain genres or certain, hot ticket things might perform better or worse than going from there. Now, there's still like some kind of gray area on what exactly this all means in practice. So at the moment, it's basically just a creation of this unit with a head, and then like kind of lip service from there. So we haven't, obviously it was just announced like a week ago or so. So we haven't really seen it in practice, and we probably won't see it in practice for like at least another like half a year, if not a full year.
Yeah. They'll start slowly drip feeding us stuff that was supposed to come out in theaters or on one of their networks, and just plop it right down into Disney Plus or Hulu. And we may have already started seeing that with Hellstrom, which just came out, and I've heard nothing but terrible things about. It's one of those Marvel Black Label shows that they just kind of popped it into Hulu, and nobody's saying anything about it because it's like whatever. Yeah. You'll probably get to it. I don't know if you have the headline, but Luke Cage is apparently showing up in future projects for Marvel.
Not. Is it the same guy? Same guy from the Netflix show?
Yes. I can't remember his name. But they're basically bringing back his character for future Marvel endeavors.
Oh, I've not seen this.
I don't believe it. Maybe it may have been a rumor and may not have been confirmed. I don't have the article in front of me, so just trust Zach's news stories, not mine. But I remember reading the headline.
Nick's news is the asterisk news. Of that
mine is the... I mean, is he making it up? I am drinking some True. I'm on number 3. I'm like halfway through number 3.
Well, I can give you some more asterisk news if you want.
Go give me that good sweet asterisk.
So, according to some insiders from different studios, apparently near the beginning of the whole pandemic, MGM was workshopping the possibility of selling No Time to Die off to streaming services for a nice little sum of $600 million just for the rights. Now there's like some other, profit sharing type stuff that goes into whether or not
changing hands.
Whether or not that would be beneficial, and then like marketing agreements that would come into play as well that you would have to renegotiate. But yeah, apparently that was a thing, and it may still be a thing that they're talking about. Obviously, nothing has happened yet. And of course, MGM denies it because they're like, we would never do that.
Yeah,
but you have to remember that this was the quote tentpole film. That's the phrase that everyone uses now. By the way, the tentpole film. You never saw it beforehand, but now you see it all the time. That caused all the pushes in the first place, and amid the theater closures.
That, along with films like Black Widow and Mulan as well.
But it's interesting to know because that would definitely, if that did make the switch to streaming, that would definitely be probably the biggest, I would think, with the second being Mulan.
We see headlines and just keep coming back to it, but with AMC saying, hey, we're not going to have any money by the end of 2020. Yeah. And it's the second largest theater chain in the world, which is a big indicator of where the movie theater industry is right now.
The market.
And that's, going back to Disney pivoting more towards streaming services, Disney is only seeing this as a win for them because they have the ability to output their programming onto their own digital platforms, whereas movie theaters relied on the success of animated films like Soul. Like, imagine if Frozen never came out in theaters and Disney basically wasted all that money for nothing. I mean, that's basically what they had to do with Mulan. They had to recoup that money because it was a tentpole film.
Right.
And they couldn't delay it any longer. That's what MGM is secretly trying to do. They don't want to go into bankruptcy again.
Well, yeah, and like Bond is by far MGM's biggest property. So if that were to happen, then it would be a gigantic shift, not only in how they themselves are approaching the market, but how the market itself will play out.
Right.
So yeah, it's just a little interesting tidbit there.
Sure.
All right, got a couple left. On the Disney front, a new teaser trailer dropped for Raya and the Last Dragon.
I liked the music in it.
Yeah, and yeah, it looks pretty neat. I'm down. What is the difference? Can you explain to me what the difference between a teaser trailer, and a trailer is?
Okay, so teaser is a 30-second spot, usually dropped on social media to excite you for the teaser trailer. Yes. Right. Yeah. Teaser trailer is usually about a minute and a half or less. It can sometimes be 2 minutes, although that's stretching it, to hint or is to give you a tease of the general themes and tone of the film, and the actual trailers themselves are giving you a grand scope and idea of the film, introducing you to characters, the bare bones of the plot, and the potential villains.
Wow, that was a very good answer.
That's why we have a movie podcast, Zach. I know some things. I haven't asked to risk.
I was going to approach this from a comedic point, but like you dropped your knowledge on there. So hey, now we're a knowledgeable podcast.
Yeah.
Yeah, I asked that because this teaser trailer is 2 minutes long, and yeah, I agree. I think that's on the longer end for a teaser trailer, but yeah,
it may be because they are really trying to sell it as early as possible, because it may be a long time until we actually see it, unless they are, doing the whole dropped straight to streaming. They may eventually do that with this film.
Mm-hmm. It's possible.
They're gonna probably test the waters with Soul, and they already have the information and numbers from Mulan, so it's just kind of it's a crapshoot at this point.
Yeah.
I think it was supposed to come out at the middle of next year. and it may be even longer.
I believe you're right, but it's hard to keep track because everything's moved like 3 times now. So yeah,
they should be focusing on just releasing all the stuff that is complete and done.
Yeah,
like Black Widow.
Yeah. So yeah, that looks pretty neat. I'm down for that. Moving on, Quibi is officially shutting down after 6 months of operation.
Man, we really should have put a little bit more time into this podcast to talk about this. Although, let's just give it less than 10 minutes because that's exactly how much it gave to me. Good original content on there. It had... I feel so bad for all of the actors and creative teams that signed up onto this fucking dead horse.
Yeah. Well, not only them, but you got all the people working in house and marketing and their tech department and all that. And it's always easy to be glib and funny with this kind of shit because it's like, well, obviously Quibi was doomed. They even said, when they were announcing this, they were like, well, between the pandemic and then just the general point of Quibi, that's probably where we failed. And I was like, okay, well, if you knew that,
why did you invest $1 billion into this?
Yeah. So it's very easy to do that, but something to keep in mind is that the people responsible for it, for the questionable move, are going to be fine. It's the people who, the creative teams, the actual employees that are maybe in a little bit of a rough spot right now. So that's unfortunate.
I think that they will probably reference to, I would like to hope or think that those people are probably moving on to bigger and better things, but this company definitely came and went in less than a Quibi. And in the same vein of very little planning going into it, apparently it may or may not be shutting down on December 1st, but they don't know. That's quick.
How do you not know when your service is shutting down? I don't know.
It's kind of a biggie. It's like hey, you need to pay your rent on time, but I don't really care when you pay it. It's like, no, seriously, I need to know when I'm going to be evicted.
Yeah. And then the last story for this episode, the scariest movie of all time up till now.
I'm glad you brought this up.
Has officially been unveiled. Nick, you saw this, yes?
Yeah.
Do you want to tell the viewers or the listeners, depending on where they are, what the scariest movie of all time up till now is?
Guten Tag. Dankeschön. This is now a joke. No, it's Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory.
That's correct.
Just kidding. The film is Sinister, 2012, directed by Scott Derrickson, known for Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness.
Yes, yeah.
Oh, did you want other information?
No. I'm sorry. My link... I might have to upload a updated version of the docket because the link I had in mind is now suddenly dead, which is weird because it was active like an hour ago.
From what website?
Forbes.
Fucking Forbes. Forbes is giving me information on Genshin Impact, which is a Chinese-based gacha free-to-play game that you can play on any platform. This isn't me advertising it. I'm just saying that Forbes, a website / magazine that is known for contributing to all kinds of pop culture while also giving you analytics based on earnings from certain companies. It's like telling me the best strategy for a video game that I'm playing right now, and it's just weird. Sorry, I needed to get that out.
No, you're good. So I was able to find the original story.
Okay.
So I'll update that before you upload. But anyway, so Sinister, by a study with a kind of a smaller group, I think around 50 participants or so, measured via BPM, has been considered the scariest movie.
That is beats per minute.
Yes. So It measured a couple other things, or at least came to the conclusion of a couple other things that I just kind of wanted to rattle off here real quick. So first being that just by virtue of elevated heart rate, the majority or three of the top movies were helmed by James Wan. So he was dubbed the Master of Horror.
Ooh, that's going to go straight to his head.
King of Horror, as it were. And also that modern movies were more likely to raise your heart rate than older movies like Nightmare on Elm Street or Friday the 13th or Exorcist even.
Right.
Interestingly enough, though, they also had a metric that talked about like movies with the scene that made your heart rate go up the highest.
Yeah.
And the third one was Exorcist 3. Yeah.
Oh, I know exactly what scene.
I think if you've seen Exorcist 3, you can kind of figure that one out.
It's an iconic scene.
Yeah. The first one with the biggest jump scare was Insidious. Now, they say that, but if you look at their nice little chart here, Insidious, its jump scare rose the participants' heart rate on average to 133 BPM.
Jeez.
Just below that was Sinister at 131. So, like, even though, like, it apparently, no matter what metric you're looking at, Sinister is fucking scary as shit.
I remember.
Which, granted, it's a really disturbing movie.
It is.
So I can definitely see that, especially when you're looking at the home movies and you have that audio track going that's like old record scratch and repeating kind of sort of thing. Yeah, this is a really neat chart. So if you're interested, kind of give it a look. Again, it's like obviously not solid,
it's
of all time.
It's such a small group that they studied. Yeah,
it's a small group, and they took like the top 100 movies based off of Rotten Tomatoes, IMDb,
very
stuff like that.
Skewed in that way already.
Yeah. So, and that would also kind of lend to, more availability of modern as well, because that's more on the kind of general consensus of like people reviewing, not more favorably, but in larger numbers.
Right.
So, yeah, but pretty neat. Oh, and Audition. I don't know if you've ever seen Audition.
Of course I've seen Audition. Yes. It's Takashi Miike.
Great movie. Fucked up, but great. That was the scariest foreign film.
That makes sense. It's on a lot of people's top 10s, and I highly recommend people check it out if they can. Yeah. It's somewhere. So I guarantee you it's streaming somewhere.
That's your little scary news.
Ooh, Halloween. This was all Halloween based. I'll put a ghost in the background of the video, sure.
Yeah.
More work for me. That's great.
Yeah.
Zach, if people wanted to email us and tell us how shitty this Halloween podcast was because I had something planned for this podcast and it ended up falling through and I fucking hate the world and I live alone and all I do is talk to my cat, and what would they do? What would they say to us?
Well, it sounds like you're in need of a treat, so you can email Nick treats to lightscameranonsense@gmail.com, or you can just contact us at lightscameranonsense.com and give him all your treats.
Give me all the tricks.
If you want to give someone tricks, you can give me the tricks.
Yeah,
I will smell the feet.
Got him.
You can give him something good to eat.
Yeah, chocolate. It's bad for me. Diabetes is prevalent in my family. Thank you, Zach. But this has been Lights, Camera, Nonsense, keeping you updated despite our best efforts. Hopefully we kept you updated. Hopefully we recommended some great Halloween films for you to watch right on the night of Halloween. We didn't even mention Nightmare Before Christmas, but that's okay. I don't care. You've probably already seen it 5 or 10 times. You already have the whole soundtrack playing in your head. Make sure to tune in every 2 weeks. I've already blanked. For all the latest news, reviews, and what else, Zach?
How do you do?
It's perfect every single time. Thanks for tuning in, and we will see you next time.